Now, if I wanted to refine this search further, that's where Refine Search comes in. And this takes us to the Advanced Search page. You see the Advanced Search link to the left there. That's actually going to open up a new blank search. So it would clear out all my search criteria. So actually, let's go look at the Advanced Search. Because the Advanced Search page gives you a lot more control over setting up your search criteria. So, at the top here, this is where you would enter items into these boxes. So, you enter your terms that you're searching on. Let's say poverty, for example. And going across here, you see they're connected by or. So that's going to broaden your search if you enter additional items. If you go down, you see they're connected by and. So that's going to narrow your search. It's going to have to include both of those terms. So, perhaps poverty and health. And actually, you can even use the or and or not operators right in these boxes, just like, any search engine. So like maybe health or welfare.
Does or have to be capped to do that?
No, it doesn't. I'm just doing that for emphasis, basically. And there's some other rules about this. I'm going to come back to those, but I want to review the rest of this form. So basically, you populate your search terms there. You can add as many rows as you want. You can go nuts with this thing and just load it up with terms if you like. Then there's all the other fields. So if you want to limit it by dollar amount, I don't show me anything less than $100,000 or something. You can specify that. You can also narrow it by deadline. So first of all, if you're interested in seeing what's coming up right away in the next 7, 30, or 90 days, there's some radio buttons here you can select. Or you can come in and choose a range of dates, or only show me something after June 30th or something like that. This is where if you want to just see limited submission items, you can mark those as such, or other internal coordination. Then we get into activity location. So this is pretty handy, especially if you've got, like I had that 900 results, and I just want to quickly, don't show me anything outside of the US, or I know I'm going to be doing research in Latin America or something like that. You can specify that. And you can either come in and just start typing a location, or sometimes it can be easier to just click on the More Locations link, and that pulls up the index. So, there's the United States. I can say, okay, just show me US. And you can add multiple locations if you want. You can even drill down further and go to the state level if you want. And, we've got some of the big countries up here, and then, the rest of the countries in the world listed here. And then there's also political or geographic groups and continents. So again, like Latin America or European Union, things like that. Now, when you specify a location, got a bunch of these checkboxes underneath. What do those mean? Well, unrestricted, of course, means that the sponsor does not have any stipulations on where the activity has to take place. So that's going to be checked by default. And I recommend leaving that checked unless you really are specifically looking for ones where the sponsor limits it only to a particular location. But see, this way, if I have US and unrestricted, that will find everything that I can apply for if US is my location. And that includes things that aren't just limited there, but could include that location, right? Unspecified, that's basically we don't have enough details from the sponsor. They don't say one way or another in the abstract or other information. You can include those if you want. And subentities and superentities. So basically, if the US is the object, a subentity of that would be California or Texas, something that is below it in the hierarchy geographically. A superentity would be North America or NATO countries, something one step up in the hierarchy. So if you leave these checked, basically what this would do is, let's say a sponsor says the activity location is North America, it has to be somewhere in North America. Well, this would find it even though you've gone in and specified United States. You didn't actually say North America, but it would include it by virtue of having those boxes checked. This is a little bit arcane, I know, but it can be kind of confusing, which is why I try to explain it. Citizenship or residency, a little simpler. It's basically just countries. So I can come in and say, well, I'm a U.S. citizen or resident. And again, there's unrestricted and unspecified check boxes that you can include or uncheck. Then there's funding type. So I mentioned some of these earlier. I wouldn't start with this as a restriction. I might come in and use these to narrow down if I have lots of results. So, I mentioned there's like artistic pursuit, contracts, dissertation, postdoc awards, training, scholarships, fellowships, travel. So lots of categories there. I'd like to find some funding to travel to Belize. Well, maybe there's some in there. Unfortunately, I don't think anybody's going to pay me to go to Belize. And then there's keywords. I mentioned these earlier. This is part of that controlled vocabulary. These can be really helpful, especially if you have sort of, like I said, the words with ambiguous or multiple meanings. In fact, one strategy you can do is don't even put in any terms up here and just search on keywords, because that's going to find things where, because these keywords are assigned by a person, it's not a computer that's pulling these out, it's an editor. It says, okay, this record is about, let's say you search on the term development. If you type the word development in one of these boxes, well, you're going to find records that have to do with economic development, perhaps fetal development, organizational development. The keywords can disambiguate that and say, okay, specifically I'm talking about business and organizational development. Or you can just not put in any terms at all and just search on those keywords. And sometimes you'll find things that you would not have found otherwise, just because somebody's using a different spelling or a different phrasing of the same topic that you're looking for. So you can type in a keyword and it will pull up and suggest matches from the index. And you see, basically it's a hierarchical structure. So there's health and medicine at the top, and then underneath that there's diseases and disorders, and it breaks down like that. And so you can choose from the list here, or you can browse. And you see, again, there's that high level, maybe go under social sciences here. And let's say, social services. And notice there's some times where it will say, we are using the term social services, not human services. So, we have to choose something, basically. And if you click on one or more of these, they show up in the list, and there's a little explode checkbox. That essentially means it'll include everything underneath that keyword in your search, unless you uncheck it.
Jason, will you type cancer in that box again? And is there a way to select multiple keywords from that list rather than one at a time?
No, there isn't, unfortunately.
And if you select one of those, the list goes away.
That's right.
It didn't used to.
Yeah, that's a little quirk of the interface. Let me make a note of that, because I've heard that feedback before. It would be nice to have some like check boxes or something in there, right? Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
Yep. No, you're not the only person who have missed that. Yeah, missed that functionality from before. All right. Okay, a few more fields here. There's requirements. So this is where you can come in and specify, if this would be what's required of you, in order to be eligible to apply. So, if you're looking for money for graduate students, you can specify that, or new faculty, minorities, nonprofits, small business, etc. And again, I wouldn't necessarily start with those as limits, but perhaps if you've got too big of a list, use those to narrow things down. And then sponsor type. You know, and so if you want to find just private foundation money or federal government money. And at the bottom of this form, this is where you've got all your fields and you've got your boxes here. This is for excluding things. So this is like using the not operator in your search. So like I mentioned with that search on stem, maybe you come in and say exclude stem cells. And that way it just, you know, filters out some of the irrelevant things that don't match your criteria. Or any of these other fields, you know.
How do you do the combined words? Because I was noticing that I type in 2 words, it searches for each word.
Yes, good question. So the way that works, so for example,
Like if you had stem and then not stem cells, do you do quotes?
quotes, that's right, yeah. So if you're looking for a phrase, then yeah, put it in quotes, and then it searches for that exact phrase. Now if I were to put in, you know, say something like drug abuse, it's kind of funny. On the advanced search, it would interpret that as drug and abuse. So in other words, those 2 records have to be in the records, those 2 words have to be in the record somewhere, but not necessarily right next to each other. So you could end up with all kinds of, you know, this would have to do with, you know, spousal abuse and, you know, drug companies and, you know, not at all anything to do with drug abuse. On the quick search, it actually will put an or between them, and then you'll end up with way more records than you want. So again, you put it in quotes if you want that exact phrase. Now, one thing that I'll point out though is if you put it in quotes, it's going to look for that specific phrase only. So there's a trick you can do that does essentially the same thing, but it's a little more forgiving. And that is to put in a word and then use this, it's called a proximity search. So I'm putting a W/ and then a number. And in this case, I'm using 8. 8's sort of a good rule of thumb. And then the next word. So what this means is find records where the word drug is within 8 words of the word abuse. So that'll find things like abuse of drugs. I don't know if anybody says that, but you know, things that could be a little bit different, especially like if you're looking, you know, just that different phrasing. Sometimes that'll turn up 5 or 6 more records that otherwise you would have missed out on and are in fact in line with what you're looking for. You can also use pre/8, and that finds the first word has to be within 8 words before the second word. So it's a little bit more restrictive on there. Incidentally, I'm going to point out when we get to the end, there's a help file that talks about all these search engine rules. So there is a document you can use if you're like, what's going on here? You know, it tells you make sure to put in quotes and other things like you can put in an asterisk for truncation. So, you know, that would find anything starting with those 4 letters, ABUS, so abuse, abused, abusive. So those are some tricks you can use, especially, you know, if you're either getting too many or too few results, you know, think about those and maybe adjust your search accordingly. You know, it's a bit of you do a search, see what records you get, modify it, you know, kind of go back and forth a little bit.